You get to Congress. Is it going to be real? Are we actually going to be willing to defund IRS, FBI, and things of that nature?
Well, I mean, we have to. I mean, we're at a point in our country now where we have a unregulated fourth branch of government that's targeting middle-class Americans on a daily basis. I mean, it's unbelievable what we're seeing. You know, a lot of people have likened the situation that's going on right now as, you know, they say we're in a banana republic. I think that's an insult to banana republics across the country. I mean, at least the manager at Banana Republic, unlike our president, knows where he is and why he's there and what he's doing.
Bo Hines, a Trump-backed Republican congressional nominee from North Carolina, doesn't know what a banana republic is, but he's still defending a retail store. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and a talking point that we keep hearing from right-wing media outlets in regards to the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago is that the U.S. is now practically a third world country or a banana republic.
Tonight, Banana Republic.
Now the regime is getting another 87,000 IRS agents to wield against its adversaries. Banana Republic.
I mean, this was absolute insanity. I mean, this was Banana Republic territory.
21st century America under Joe Biden is no better than a banana republic.
That is not a republic. Well, it may be. It's a banana republic when that happens.
Both terms are highly problematic and misleading for reasons that we'll discuss, but for as much as I kept hearing the terms just being thrown around everywhere, it never occurred to me that people would think Banana Republic was in reference to the retail store Banana Republic. And maybe I was naive to assume that people would know that their media personalities and politicians weren't just referring to what notoriously bad retail management. Is Banana Republic known for that? Does Banana Republic epitomize bad management so succinctly and indisputably that it's become culturally pervasive as a pop culture reference analogous to government overreach and corruption? No, obviously not. My assumption was that even if people didn't fully get the Banana Republic reference, they would at least know that the reference wasn't talking about a retail store. And they would be forgiven for not being able to make sense of the reference because it's a bad reference. Still, we've got a congressional candidate defending the retailer, complaining that it's not fair to Banana Republic that we keep comparing the state of our national government to the state of their mall locations. Now, how anyone can take him seriously as a candidate is beyond me, if for no other reason than he has the audacity and the arrogance to speak about things he doesn't even realize he doesn't understand. But you know what they say, the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know, which is usually a humbling realization for people. Bo seems not only to know very little, but more dangerously, he seems uninterested in filling in his own knowledge gaps before speaking publicly as a political candidate. Unfortunately, people like that tend to be the loudest and the most confident in their ignorance. Right-wing commentators and politicians keep comparing the US government and our nation to banana republics and third world countries in a misguided effort to imply that our government is now corrupt as if it wasn't before. But before we talk about banana republics, we need to talk about why the term third world countries is nonsense or at the very least obsolete. Today, it tends to be used when people want to refer to poor or less developed countries, but more often than not, it's used in a derogatory way to refer to a place that's dirty, corrupt, crime-ridden, and or impoverished. When people think of third world countries, they're usually thinking about countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And interestingly, most of these third world countries were former European colonies, left in shambles by imperialists and capitalists. In other words, if you look at the history of so many of these nations, it's not entirely their fault that they're in whatever state they're in. They had to deal with foreign intervention that sought to usurp and exploit their resources, their land, and their people. Foreign intervention that caused or contributed to, whether intentionally or unintentionally, political and social unrest within these nations, and foreign intervention that affected these nations in ways that had long-lasting impacts that they're still struggling to overcome. It's incredibly ignorant and insensitive to sit here comfortably in the United States and criticize third world countries for their shortcomings when the United States and other imperialist powers very much contributed to or engineered those shortcomings. But as I mentioned, the term itself is obsolete. It came about during the Cold War, so around 70 years ago. It was based on the idea that there are 3 worlds, 1 planet. The first world was the US and its allies, the second world was the communist bloc, and the third world was everyone else. The guy who coined the term, a French demographer, adapted the term from the Third Estate, which was what the poor people of France who suffered from rampant inequality prior to the French Revolution were sometimes referred to. Here again, the people comprising France's Third Estate were victims of governmental greed and poor policies, among other things. They weren't inherently less than, as the term now implies. And that's the problem. It's the old pull yourself up by your bootstraps fallacy, where we expect people or entire nations to pull themselves out of holes that we dug and stuck them in. On top of that, anytime you have a broad sweeping term, there are going to be exceptions to the classifications, which is the case now even more so than it was 70 years ago. Efforts have been made to replace the term with other terms that are more modern and more applicable, but in keeping with the previous statement, none of them are perfect. Now, the term banana republic is related to all of this. A banana republic is defined as a nation that is generally unstable and dependent on a single crop or export, such as bananas. That's the definition, but the history of the term is much more telling. I actually just got back from Guatemala, which is one of these Central American banana republics. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people, beautiful culture, but it's got a lot of problems both politically and economically. Now, in the early 1900s, the United Fruit Company put all of its eggs, which in this case were bananas, into one basket. They were delicious, nutritious, easy to grow, and easy to ship, and the United States was obsessed. The United Fruit Company needed more bananas to meet increasing demand, so they looked to Central American countries for the land to cultivate the crop. They did this by bribing local governments and leaders so that the corporations would be allowed to freely operate on their land. They cleared tracts of rainforest throughout the region, and at one point, the company owned over 40% of Guatemala's land. With so much land growing a single crop, the land was stripped of its biodiversity and disease was allowed to spread from one farm to another, from one country to another. The United Fruit Company abandoned many of its diseased farms, which meant abandoning its farmers, plunging them into poverty, and crippling the local economies. Now, many of these farmers were already barely earning a living wage to begin with, if they were at all, so they had no assets or savings to fall back on. On top of that, the United Fruit Company had infiltrated many aspects of the country's local government, in some cases actually performing various roles that a government would normally be responsible for. Meanwhile, the corporation needed new banana farms that were free from disease, so they cleared more tracts of rainforest, further damaging the local ecosystems. Then, by the 1950s, a few of the dictators who had originally partnered with the United Fruit Company were being ousted from their governments, and in Guatemala, the newly and democratically elected president attempted to buy back the Guatemalan land that had been sold to the company. The president's goal was to give that land back to the farmers so that they could replenish it and recultivate it, bettering both the farmers' livelihood and the nation's economy in the process. However, the United Fruit Company wasn't keen to sell the land back to Guatemala, which would have resulted in huge financial losses for them thanks to the company's own shady accounting practices. So, in the interest of its bottom line, the corporation decided to just get rid of the new Guatemalan president by staging a coup in the country with the help of the United States CIA. And what is it that they say? Communism is just a red herring. Indeed. The CIA justified its coup with claims of rampant communism in Guatemala. Now keep in mind, this is the 1950s, it's the Cold War. Communism was the red herring, the obvious enemy of capitalism and freedom and everything else the United States proclaims to stand for. The obvious irony was that while communism was being blamed for the deterioration of a nation, Guatemala and other nations like it were truly victims of unchecked capitalism in the most direct sense. A US-sponsored anti-government propaganda campaign and a 36-year-long civil war followed the coup, a war that eventually targeted and decimated Guatemala's native Mayan population. Now, modern-day Guatemala was the center of Mayan civilization in Central America, and many Mayan descendants still live there today. Mayan culture is a strong component of modern Guatemalan culture. During the Civil War, an estimated 150,000 Mayans were killed or disappeared on the grounds that they were supportive of anti-government insurgents. According to the University of Southern California, from 1980 to 1983, just a 3-year span, death squads, as they were called, torched buildings and crops, leveled over 400 villages, slaughtered livestock, poisoned water supplies, snatched people off of the streets, and dragged people from their homes. Many of those that were snatched and dragged were raped, killed, and thrown into unmarked graves. Among the survivors, approximately 200,000 fled the country, finding sanctuary in Mexican refugee camps. Displacement for bananas, poverty for bananas, genocide for bananas. And I know I was focusing on Guatemala here, but there are similarly horrifying stories throughout Central and South America, notably Honduras and Colombia. So that's what a banana republic is. It's government overreach and corruption for sure, but not the kind that right-wing journalists, commentators, and politicians would have you believe. It's government overreach in a foreign government under false and self-serving premises in the name of capitalistic gain at the great expense of the foreign nation. The National Archive trying and failing to retrieve stolen classified documents from an ex-president's private estate has nothing to do with any of this. The FBI being called in after the National Archive exhausted its options with an uncooperative and belligerent ex-president has nothing to do with this. It's a gross misrepresentation of actual horrors committed and justified by our government to people and nations that we now have the audacity to look down on as third world or less than. We need to leave these countries out of our drama and stop insulting them. All right, that's it for me. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you got something out of this, and please be sure to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks.